Within the first scene, one should be able to predict certain things. There's college students, a graveyard, drinking, and magic. I wonder if they're going to get picked off one by one by a force they shouldn't have messed with. It's pretty sad that this is how a lot... Anyway, there's talk of Jacob Shaw, a local legend who could create his own worlds. The group of future victims sober up enough to chant Egyptian over lit candles. They're transported into a house, instantly separated into various rooms of the dark abode. Each explores their surroundings, finding torture implements, fresh blood, blank books, and pottery. Safe to say the ritual worked. Cut to John doing a bit of drinking himself, brooding over Gary Lester's past reflection in his magic mirror. Is this the first time John's had a pity party? I think it is. It's probably well deserved at this point. Manny wasn't invited, but he comes anyway. Zed and Chaz are on break this week, but luckily John has Richie Simpson to partner up with. Richie teaches what looks like an arcane study folklore class. Yet he's not the most personable teacher. I'm honestly surprised none of the students are asleep. A hand shoots up during the course of the class, and of course, it's John, being a bit of an upstart. Something tells me he never did the college-university tour once his primary schooling was over. It probably didn't stop him from picking up girls on campus, though. One of the male students, Carter, from the opening scene, is summoned back into the house and is suffocated by a plastic bag. This is what comes from not recycling them! In the real world, he's found dead on the sidewalk. This episode's villain definitely has drawn influence from Freddy Krueger. His victims don't have to be asleep to be in danger, though. Much like last time, Richie doesn't want to associate with John. Probably even more so once John reveals Gary is dead. Richie stopped his data mining, his own version of the John's trouble map. I can't blame him, since staring in obliqueness is probably emotionally draining. Richie's TA Adam calls and declines to hold office hours since his friend Carter just died. Yep, fat guy on the sidewalk. His girlfriend Lily is being stalked by the same spirit that took out Carter. John pickpockets a campus cop and finds out the details on Carter's death. Lily tries to talk to Miranda about what the group has experienced, but she's in serious denial. Lily confesses to Richie that their group was just trying to have fun. As John investigates the graveyard, he relates his past with Richie to Manny, who literally flew in. They were thick as thieves, with Richie being an equal partner when it came to magic. Blondie Miranda goes into a dance studio to practice her ballet and is the next to bite the dust. With John's intel, Richie is able to fill in the blanks, and it all comes down to Jacob Shaw's journal. By all accounts, he was a rather suspicious character with a questionable fate. I pretty much already guessed that, since he was been referred to as a sort of urban legend. Adam and Lily are worried about Miranda, but have different viewpoints on where she could have gone since she's not answering her cell phone. Her battery could be out of juice. Doesn't mean something bad has happened. Richie and Johnny walk the campus, and Richie describes singularity, a theory that when technology and humanity come together, someone's mind can achieve immortality on another plane of reality. Influence from the comic? Check. Adam uses the Egyptian ritual once again. So smart, isn't he? And finds Miranda immediately in the house, while Lily finds Miranda's dead body in the real world. Richie and John come upon Adam in a trance, but are too late as Adam's body suffers the wound Jacob Shaw inflicts upon him, metaphysically, and he swiftly dies. Richie's honest when he describes his and John's lives as toxic, spraying it among the masses. He's not buying John's front and calls him on it. Unsurprisingly, John takes it in stride and doesn't talk back. I notice he does this with friends, but never strangers. He's always rude to them. Anyway, Lily is in a panic, even more so when she hears Adam's dead. Shaw's newest victims discuss their situation, and the man himself comes to them. He reveals himself to be a serial killer and bides them all to run. Adam refuses to play Shaw's game, taking blows to his kneecaps to try to prove he can't be hurt if he believes he won't. It doesn't exactly work out for him. Ouch. John and Richie bring Lily to the mill house for safety, but it doesn't last long, since Lily picks up her phone to call her mom, which is, surprise, enough of a reflective surface that Shaw can bring her back to his own reality. John sets up his own ritual, and Richie is hesitant to participate. He wrings his hands, but finally sits down to it. That a boy. In Shaw's house, the pair set off to find Lily. An impressive feat of willpower, Richie creates a door in a dead end. Shaw says hello to them by way of explaining that it's his world and his rules. He slashes Richie's wrists and half crucifies John. I wonder if that's a statement or just unintentional writing. Richie takes control of Shaw's reality and makes it his own, killing Shaw in the process. I guess two minds can't control the same place. Lily is crushed that her friends can't come out of the house. Their souls are free to pass on once Shaw's house is obliterated. John and Richie remain in the alternate plane, and Richie reveals he wants to stay permanently. He's tired of being afraid of the rising darkness. John calls him out on the decision, essentially calling him a coward. His noodling works, though, however, since Richie comes back to the real world. Good job, John. Way to talk him down the ledge. Back in his class, Richie ditches the lazy way of teaching and gives a lecture about achieving nirvana and what truths one has to accept first. John's gone back to gaze at Gary's ghost in the mill, back on the drinking and smoking bench, trying to satisfy his own empty desires. Definitely a brooder, John is. Before I get too far, I'll start with explaining this episode is a very, very loose adaptation from the Resurrection Crusade storyline in the Hellblazer comic. In it, Richie goes into a virtual world and runs into a powerful firewall during a task for John, which causes his flesh and blood body to burst into flames. John leaves Richie's consciousness trapped in the virtual world, meeting up with him later on. He's one of the few people who survive John's friendship, despite whatever consequences he suffers from the association. Being one of the Newcastle crew as well, Richie got off perhaps the lightest from the experience. In the comic, at least. His TV counterpart certainly seems to have agonized more about the botched exorcism, becoming addicted to drugs, and investigating alternate planes of reality in an attempt to relieve his guilt. John even confirms Richie fell the hardest out of the whole group. It's stuff like this that really makes me want to see a Newcastle flashback episode already. In the comic, Richie is a computer programmer described as a quantum magician. A bit different from a college professor, but their personalities remain much the same. I love the strained quality of his relationship with John. I can see glimpses of how well they must have got on in the past and how splintered it appears now. I fully expected Richie to succumb to the fate he has in the comics, but was pleasantly surprised by the ending. It's really nice to see Richie man up again, and John has moved from the main to supporting role because he's going up against something he can't fight. He knew that going in, though, hence the need to work with Richie. Very smart. My very minor complaint about this episode is the nature of Jacob Shaw's character. I'm a big horror fan and have a special love for the Nightmare on Elm Street series. Freddy Krueger is my go-to when I want to watch a slasher flick. Freddy kills people in dreams. Incorporating the same elements into Jacob Shaw strikes me as a little bit lazy, even if they did change the setting and a few rules. It's not a dream, but an alternate plane, and one doesn't have to be asleep, just near a reflective surface. I'll admit the phone being used as such was clever. I'm not saying the whole thing doesn't work, but Shaw ends up being a very one-note villain in the end. We're given a bit of history, but that's about it. All we know is that he created his own world so he could kill however and whenever he wanted, eventually dragging in real people to act as his victims. In all, it's the character interaction between John and Richie that makes watching this episode fun. There's also scenes where we get to see Gary in the mill. In the comics, John was regularly haunted by his dead friends and family, although there is a question about whether or not they were real or just ghosts from John's subconscious. But it is nice to see the writers incorporate that tidbit into the show. It's just too bad John and Gary don't interact directly. Another strong episode in the series, and one I'd rate 4 out of 5. Not perfect, but nearly there.